Hello everyone, nice to see you. I hope you're all going well, not going too crazy in lockdown. Again, let me know anything that you're doing to keep yourselves sane in this very strange time that we're all living through, the pages of history that we're in. It's a very right time for creating. If any of you are that way inclined, I think it's a great time to be thinking about writing stuff, writing scripts, writing scenes, even if you're not sure where it will go. Writing poetry, writing a novel, writing whatever it is. Because perhaps you've been afforded some more time, although perhaps some of you not. I know you're all under some pretty busy schedules, I'm sure, but also because it's just a really interesting moment for humanity to reflect upon itself, and we're going through a lot of changes in it, and it really is inspiring for creating. So you want to be thinking about that. As actors, you are artists, and as artists you want to be reflecting upon what's going on historically for humanity at any one point in time. Creating work about stuff that's relevant is what we should all be seeking to do. We're trying to form part of the conversation about who we are and who we want to be in this world as humans. And so this is a really interesting time creatively. So see if you can find yourself a little bit inspired by this, if you can. So yeah, let me know any films you're watching as well, and what you thought of them, any performances that stuck out, excuse me. And just generally, how you're going. Let me know how you're going in your videos or in your emails. So this week I watched a couple of interesting films. I watched a film, I rewatched, I'd seen them both before, but a while ago, a very long while ago in one case. So I watched Only God Forgives and Requiem for a Dream this week. So Only God Forgives is a follow-up to Nicholas Winding Refn's, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, stupendously brilliant film, Drive. It's one of my favourite films of all time, Drive. It's like a 2011 film, I think. And it's just wonderful. It's the coolest film I've ever seen, I would be pretty confident in saying. It's visually stunning. The pacing's really poetic. The performances are really held and subtle for the most part. The story's really kind of gripping and shocking. Every element of it, the soundtrack is unbelievable. It's so good. Even if you don't see the film, do see the film. 100% see the film, it's amazing. But listen to the soundtrack. Even just the soundtrack is phenomenal. The score is amazing. Cliff Martinez, not sure how to pronounce it. Yeah, very, very cool. Like 80s dirty synth pop with a bit of a grunge or something feel to it. Yeah, a phenomenal film. Unbelievably good film. I love that film, as you can tell. And then this was his next film, a couple of years later, I think 2013, so it's a while ago now. So I saw it like kind of pretty soon when it came out, I think. And it feels to me like a director who had a very successful Hollywood film, who has then been given a bit more creative license to go a bit more funky with it, and he certainly has. So all the elements of Drive are there, the slow rhythm, the lack of dialogue, the neon visuals, the similar kind of scoring through it, but a very different flavour. I think again it's Cliff Martinez. And yeah, I didn't like it as much. It's a very poetic film. It's very kind of lethargic and then not in moments, but it's very slow bleed and poetic and cloudy, and I like that about it in parts, but probably just missing a little bit of the clarity or edge that I found Drive had, and more humanity in Drive, whereas these people are much harder to relate to. Only God Forgives, and it's much more just like a visual auditory feast with some really interesting bits to it, but and the other thing is violence. If you don't like violence, maybe don't watch these films. Drive has a lot of no violence, and then there's just moments of violence, and when it hits it, it's quite violent. But yeah, Only God Forgives, similar thing. Some really violent moments and some really dark themes, but yeah, still I didn't mind. Like, visually it's beautiful, and some of the technique is really quite alluring. But yeah, was not as big on it as Drive. So I've done this thing where I've started rating films. I try to rate films when I see them, and I hate the idea of ratings in some way, because it's so impossible I feel, as a scientist as well. You look at how valid a rating is, and you can, if you observe your own mind sufficiently and your own biases and the factors involved, there's so much involved that isn't about, it's about the state that you're in, and whether or not you'd seen that kind of a film for a while, and all these things, such that it's hard to get a clear rating, but I'm just being super pedantic and scientific about it. And also just the idea that your idea of a film, it's just so many biases and things going on. Anyway, but I've decided to start rating films. So I'm giving them an out of 10 rating with a 0.25 increment. So I gave Only God Forgives 7.25. So it was still good, but whereas Drive I'd give like a 9.5. Okay, so then I also saw Requiem for a Dream, which is, whoa, it's very heavy. So, yeah, I saw it years ago, maybe like 2009, 2008, somewhere there. And I loved it. I really, really liked it. But I was like, whoa, that is dark, that is intense. And I rewatched it, and it was very much as I remembered it, very dark, very intense, but brilliant. It really is very good. The journey that it takes you on is makes you feel sick, or it made me feel sick anyway. So it's essentially etching a journey into addiction, and being in the full throes and the worst of what it can do to your life in addiction. And whilst it is speaking to drug addiction in the film, it also alludes to other forms of addiction, and television and celebrity, and the stuff that we grab onto to try to find meaning in our lives if we're feeling empty in our lives. And yeah, it's a really great film. The journey, I know I've spoken in class before about builds and about what I call the Yoha Q. If you haven't heard me say that one before, it's essentially just about building toward a climax and then having a resolution. So yeah, just more specifically, so Yoha Q, just to unpack that a little bit, another couple of examples that are sometimes used is think of a waterfall. So the waterfall has the build, and then the climax is the water going off the waterfall, and then it's resolved when it lands at the bottom. Another thing is an arrow. So you have the pulling back, boom, and then boom, it releases is the climax, and then it hits the arrow is the resolve. It's finished, yeah? So it's just essentially about building toward a climax, and then having that climax, and then having it finish and land. And you want to look for that in your scenes. Always look for it. Doesn't mean necessarily you're always doing something as clear as that, but see if you can build your scene toward a climax and then have that resolve. So that means building rhythm, so just getting faster, intensity, getting more intense, more angry, more sad, more happy, more whatever it is, or more strange perhaps. Think about what dimensions on which can you build a scene? Can you make something get more and more a certain way? But a real general one is just rhythm. If you can just build a scene, often when there's conflict, it's like you build, and so you're building in terms of pace and in terms of volume, and bam, and then it resolves after a climax. But this film, Requiem for a Dream, is a really good example of, there's a real, and it's got that real kind of asymptotic, like for anyone who's into maths, when a curve hits an asymptote and it goes really quickly to infinity when it hits a certain point, rather than just like a slow build like this. It kind of goes slow and then, and this film really does that. There's something really parabolic about the build to it that's really beautiful. It's very intense very quickly. So it also feels kind of like there's this thing called the Fibonacci Sequence, which, again, any mathematicians in the audience, is basically just a sequence where it builds upon the previous numbers in the sequence. So it starts with, I think different people have it starting different ways. Some people have it starting with 0, some people have it starting with 1. But it goes 1, and then 2, because 2 is made up of 1 plus 1 equals 2. So then you've got 1, 1, 2, and then the next number is 3, because the two numbers that came before 3 were 2 and 1. You add them together, you get 3. And then 3, and the one that came before it is 2. So you have 5 is the next number in the sequence. And then 5 plus 3 was the one that came before it. You have 8. 8 and 5 is 13. 8 and 13, 21, etc., etc. So it's a mathematical principle, but you see it everywhere in nature and in art and in so many things. So like it's the way that a lot of flowers kind of have their growth. They kind of grow out from a point. In photography, often if you map Fibonacci on it does like a spiral, right? So the spiral is like a flower or like a shell, cone shell, or in photography you have a spot in the frame that's kind of about there-ish, where if you start from there and you build out, then it does this kind of, where it fills the frame like that. And so sometimes photography or film uses a point of focus somewhere around there. But yeah, the rhythmic build of this felt very Fibonacci-like, in that it wasn't just like a steady increase. It was like started slow and then because, as you can see, the difference from 1 to 2 is small and 2 to 3 is small. But by the time you get up to, as you saw, we started getting 8 and 21 and 8 and 13 and 21. And then you have, big numbers happen really quickly, because the numbers you're building on, is self-building on itself, and gets bigger and bigger. So it kind of felt like that as well. Beautifully crafted film in a number of ways. And there was this, Ellen Burstyn is amazing in it. She's really quite a fine actor. I haven't seen like a heap of her work, but I've always liked her when I've seen her. I saw her live actually in Melbourne last year maybe. In a play called 33 Variations, I think it was, which was kind of cool, directed by a director that I worked with many years ago, and wasn't a huge fan of, but that's between you and me. She's wonderful. She was so beautiful live, but I've always enjoyed whatever I've seen of her. And she came and spoke to a group of actors in Melbourne when I was at drama school many years ago, and I was in my first year of drama school, and whilst I'd been loving it, I'd also been struggling with parts of the training where I had felt like they were asking me to kind of kill the beauty that I had made by overdoing something. And I was much more just like, I wanted to just, if I could find my connection, then I didn't want to do much to craft it because I felt like that was killing my connection. And it's about being able to do both and be able to not kill a connection even if you're doing it a lot, to find ways to do it in such a way that you don't kill the connection and that you actually build the connection. But I was really kind of frustrated a bit with the school in that way, in that moment when I went and saw her. I just felt like she vindicated me. It was such a beautiful, inspiring evening. She was talking about her performance style, and she talked about, I've spoken to many of you in class before about the idea of having a composer. So you want to be able to be in the moment, which is more one side of your brain, and then you want to be analytical, which is more the other side of the brain. So the creative and the analytical, to be gross about our brains. It's not that they're necessarily like that, but there is a bit of a preference that way. And so you want to be able to be totally present and train yourself to be totally present as an actor, such that you're not identified with thought, you're just in experience in the moment, whatever's happening. You're not in the future or the past, you're just here, present. Simple as that. It's very simple, but it's quite kind of difficult to achieve for extended periods of time at least. But then you also want to have the capacity to be able to compose and go, oh, this part's a bit slow, it needs to go faster. Oh, what can I drop in here to help me connect to this moment better? Yeah. And that is a way that I worked. And then I heard her talk about her process, and she talked about, I think she said something about this idea of something orbiting. And I think I've really taken that on in my practice in terms of when I go to explain the composer, I think of it as orbiting. And I think that might have been influenced by that night, perhaps a couple of things, but I think that was part of it. I think it's a lovely image for this idea of something that is just able to be there and just jump in when you need it. Anyway, she talked about that, and I felt so vindicated, particularly because she was talking about Requiem for a Dream, and there's this scene in it where she's amazing, which I think I might have shown. I have shown. Some of you might have seen it. I've shown it in class before, where she's talking about being old, and she's talking about what has she got in life to appreciate it, and it's just, it's such a powerful monologue, and it kind of serves as like a kicker for when the film starts to really like go a bit off. And she's phenomenal in it, and she told the story about preparing that monologue, and she said, when I read that, words to the effect of, I'm obviously paraphrasing, I don't remember exactly what she said, but she said, when I read that, I didn't want to do any work on it, and so I asked the director, can we not rehearse this? I don't want to touch this. And so she didn't, just learned the lines, knew that she had a connection to it, and what you see on the day is the first time that she performed it fully. I'm not sure what she might have done before that, but she just learned it, had a connection with it, and knew that she had something to say with this monologue. She just connected to it, so she didn't feel like she needed to do it to death and do so much on it. And that's not, but as an acting teacher, I would advise you to make sure that you do the exact opposite as well, at least. It takes a long time to really craft, maybe, like push up against this if you disagree, but it takes a long time to craft your insight into when you truly do just have something that you don't need to do much work on, even if it's just a moment, versus doing lots and lots and lots of work and supporting that. So I would say, it's good to do work even if you have this great connection, because it can support it. But there are maybe these special moments where you go, I just need to learn this bit and not do much to it and just use that connection that I have in here and speak from that place. And that's what she did in the film, and it's amazing. And it's the first take that she did is the one that ended up in the film. And there's this funny thing about the technicalities of filmmaking, apparently, which I didn't remember seeing, but apparently it goes slightly out of focus at one point. It can be so subtle. We don't notice this as audience members. Slightly out of focus, the end of her nose or something, and they're like, that was unbelievable. We were just slightly out of focus. Can we go again? They went again. Wasn't as good. They used the out of focus take. So yeah, it's just so funny. I find the technical side of filmmaking so interesting because it is so important. It's such a big part of it, but so often I feel like technicians can become so finicky, which is fair enough because that's their craft. But for the audience, it's like the audience doesn't notice. You know, some very, very tiny percentage of the audience will notice tiny little technical things like that. And, you know, I'm biased because I'm an actor, but it's like if it's a trade-off between a mind-blowing performance that's going to shake someone's soul and something that's ever so slightly out of focus for a second, I think that we should go with the mind-blowing performance. So I'm glad that they did that in this case. So, yeah, that film is phenomenal, and her performance is amazing. And it's very disturbing, very dark. But I loved it. It's a great film. So I gave that one, again, I'm really not sure on this, but I gave that like 9.25-9, somewhere in there. I kind of cheated on that one. But yeah, 9.25 is the main rating. I find it very disturbing. Anyway, so there's some films I watched this week. So, this week's exercise, I want us to do, to practice what is called public solitude. So, for those of you who've never heard of this phrase or never done anything on this, public solitude is about practicing being in public, but as if you are by yourself, yeah? Obviously, this is so important as an actor, that you are not aware of the camera, not aware of being watched, and you're just acting like as if you are just alone with this actor in a room, or alone by yourself in a room, or whatever it is, that you are not going, oh, I'm being watched right now. And it brings this sense of awareness, and it can often bring this sense of plussing, which is what I call it when you do extra that isn't required for this moment, that isn't true connection. It's something, it's like showing or acting something true instead of just being or doing something true. So, yeah, very, very important skill for the actor is that ability to just act like as if no one's watching you, and just let yourself be observed without any sense of that. So if you really zoom in on this, this is a really, it takes a lot of awareness about your own mind and about your own kind of reaction and how your physical and inner world is affected by being observed, because so often when we're observed, it shifts us, yeah? And we just have to practice how do we not let it shift us, yeah? And knowing there are ways that you can use it to let it in and allow it to help, and ways in which it will distract and it won't help. And that's up to you to navigate through your acting journey as to how to do that. But essentially, I would say, for me, it's about, for the most part, ignoring it and being totally just with my fellow actor or in my own world if it's just me on the screen. But that I can use the reminder of being watched to feel like I have the whole world with me, so that it can fill my heart and my mind and my soul and my body to inform a really epic or special moment if something, because ultimately you are speaking, you want to feel like you're speaking to the whole world. There's a great Stella Adler quote, I think it is, that is about performing for the whole world. Let me see if I can find it. Maybe it's not Stella Adler. Yeah, here we go. Okay, when you stand on the stage or in front of the camera, you must have a sense that you are addressing the whole world, and that what you say is so important, the whole world must listen. Whew. Beautiful. It fills me just reading it, just hearing it. That is how, when I read that quote, that hit me so much, because that is how I always approached my, well, I don't know about always, but very early on I felt this sense of wanting it to be like, that I felt like I was more full and more able to give something special when it felt like I was connecting to humanity, when I was going, I am going through this experience and telling this story because this is a human story, real or imagined, that all of us across the whole world, we can all relate to some version of something going on. So that whatever I'm doing right now, someone has experienced something just like this. And so I'm speaking to everyone and going, hey, here we all are on the human roller coaster, experiencing life. And I'm connecting to you in this moment because I know that you feel this stuff. I know that you're struggling with this stuff, to whoever it is out there, out in the world. And we need to understand what's going on here and understand one another. And so yeah, I'm connecting to humanity when I perform, and that will make you so much more powerful as an actor rather than just like, oh yeah, I'm just like saying some lines. So yeah. So you want to be thinking about how can you use the idea of being watched in that way. But generally speaking, the flip side is more important, particularly for beginning actors, around just being able to be watched and being comfortable with that and being as if you're alone. Okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to think of a few different situations, anything, it can be anything at all, where you're by yourself, and I want you to film yourself having that camera on you, you know, hearing that ding and going, okay, I'm being observed. And then I want you to perform as if you are not being watched, as if you are not being observed. So send through, if you would like, you don't have to do this, but I think it would be good to send through a clip of you doing a public solitude exercise, so that then it just has that extra pressure of knowing that you will be being watched by me. But yeah, you don't have to do that if you don't want to do that. Just the sense of filming yourself can feel that pressure of it coming on. So yeah, think of a few different activities. It can be anything at all. It can just be like sitting alone in your room, reading a book, or see, that's actually not a bad one to start with, because whenever you're actually doing something, it's easier to get that sense of public solitude because your cognitive capacity, the capacity that your brain has for attention is finite. And if your attention is taken up largely by something like reading, then it will be harder for your attention to be in, oh God, I'm being watched. Yeah, so that's absolutely not a bad one to start with. Anything where you're actually doing something, writing something down is another good one, where it will take your attention off you. And just actually, the key is just actually commit to the task of whatever you're doing. Actually commit to it. If you're actually just doing it, that's what acting is. Acting isn't pretending that you're doing things, it's actually doing things. Yeah? So anything at all, reading, writing, waiting for a bus is not a bad one, because then, you know, maybe you can just, obviously you can play your phone and do a bit of stuff on your phone, and that's great too, but also just sit there. Anything where you're just kind of sitting there, that's where it's a bit harder. You haven't got anything to do, so just look around you and do whatever you need to do. And then you might want to think about doing some imaginary miming or interacting with objects. So you might want to think about, this is the exercise I did when I was first taught public solitude many years ago. Think of something from your room and imagine that you actually have it in your hand, and just interact with it. Just feel what the edges feel like, and look at it from all angles, and do so as if you are just by yourself doing it. So I'm just going to give you a quick little example of some public solitude. So here's me sitting at a bus station. So what would be plussing, i.e. doing something more than what you'd actually do if you were not being observed, if you were just doing your own thing, would be like, you know, doing a bit of extra stuff that you don't need to be doing. Now, there's no like true right and wrong answer objectively from the outside about what's real and what's connected and what's not and what's showy for the audience. Because some people might be a bit like this, because they might be really nervous about something, or they might be someone who's, got some kind of disorder or whatever it is, such that they're doing extra stuff. But it's about subjectively, internally, your attention not being on, oh God, I'm being watched, and more just being on whatever it is that you're doing. So if you're that kind of a person, it's for a reason. So you've got to get into that state. And they're doing that for a reason, rather than, I'm just like nervous that I'm being watched, so I'm going to just like do some stuff. Yeah? So more like this. So more just you're sitting there. So relax your body. Notice if you're holding tension, even subtly, just see if you can just let that go. And just how does your body sit in space? It can be hard to just sit in space when you're being observed in a way that is just natural and normal. So just keep playing with that, keep experimenting. Simple as that. Yeah? So just play around with it. Just sit there doing some things, notice some moments where you're like, oh, okay, my attention was captured a little bit by being aware of things there, and just be like, that's totally fine, that's part of the exercise, that's part of the journey, is just noticing when you might be captured by a bit of awkwardness or a bit of, don't know what to do now, and just try to sit with it. Yeah? So that's the exercise for today. Now we're going to move on to script analysis. So, this week we have Jenny and Mum. So, obviously gender doesn't apply, so change it to Dad if you want, or change it to John if you want. So, up to you, even if it may not be age appropriate, I'm up for